pass out hymn books, and they know right what the number is, and for some reason they love that song. But boy, what a message! We deserve to be passed by, but that ought to be our cry today: is pass me not, gentle Savior. Spiritual cancer. I want to take these verses this morning, if I could, for just a few minutes, and just kind of draw this little analogy, if we could, between the two subjects. I really honestly didn't know a whole lot about cancer until a couple of years ago, when actually probably 3 or 4 years ago now, when my oldest sister Janet had found out that she had stage 4 cancer in her gallbladder, bladder cancer. Bladder cancer. And she basically, they give her some options on what to do, and she went through the treatments and all that, and I went with her to every Wednesday morning. I would go with her and take to do those treatments, and then finally she finished those out, and most of y'all were around here then, and you remember, and we prayed for her week after week, and then finally she rung the little bell up there, got her last treatment, and was, supposedly, everything was good to go. It was actually had, begin to grow through. They removed her bladder is what they done, and so she actually at 70 years old then actually 69 or 70 went back to work, and she helped manage a huge trailer park over in North Augusta, and she went back and she started doing a few things and all of that, and then she has to go back every so often, and they do a scan, and she wasn't quite feeling all right, but didn't know. And I told her, I said, well, I can. Then she was to go talk to the doctor, and I said, well, I can go with you. And she said, no, that's okay. She said, he's just, it's just a normal follow-up thing. Well, one day, that particular day of her appointment, my phone rang, and it was Dr. Wells, and he said, David? I said, yes, sir. He said, I'm here with your sister. He said, I just wanted, she wanted me to call you, and so you could just kind of hear it from me. He said, but her cancer is back in 3 different places, and he said, we can do this, this, and this. He said, but, I'm just, y'all talk about it, and, see, let her help her try to make a decision as what to do. And of course we did, and she said, you know what, I've been through all that. I was so sick the whole time. She said, I've lived my life, and she said, I'm not going through all of that, and now the odds of even the different ideas and things that they were wanting to do is probably, slim, that it's even going to help anyway. And so I asked the doctor, I said, well, how long I know you don't know. I said, but how long do you think she has? And he said, well, only God knows that. He said, but probably if I had to just take a wild guess, maybe around 6 months. And of course, she lived about 2 years, and then of course went to heaven. But and for the last 7 months there, she moved in with us and lived with us, and I got to see all the process and the stages of that, and all that she went through, and the pain and the morphine and all of that. We left here one Sunday night after church, and we had prayed for her and went home, and about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, she was in the room there with her, and she breathed her last breath. But cancer can be a terrible, terrible thing. We have a sanctuary here this morning that if I asked for a show of hands, I'm just guessing, but out of the adults here, probably 50% of the hands would go up that you had some kind of cancer that you dealt with in your life. It can certainly be, but when you begin to think about and you begin to compare it to to what Jesus is talking about here in the Scripture, there's a lot of ways that I believe that you can draw this analogy between the two and hopefully get some help and get some understanding today about our spiritual relationship and what will happen to that spiritual cancer within if it goes undetected, if we ignore it, if we don't take and do something about it. The word defile, it's described here. He talks about that which come out of a man's heart. He said that is what defiles that man. The word defile is 3 times here in these verses that we just read. Verse 18, verse 20, and then of course in verse number 23. The word defile just actually means corruption. It means that it's destroying. It means to, and if you really begin to study the word, it doesn't mean something that just happens overnight and all of a sudden it's defiled. Otherwise, it's useless. It's died. It's deteriorated. But defile is a small, otherwise kind of gives the idea of finding a spot. You know, that's how they detected and how one of the ways that they knew in the Bible when someone had leprosy. Why? Because they had spots on them. You know, people today, you know, they go to the doctor, they get different scans and things done, and the doctor will say, you know what, we see a spot on your lung, we see a spot on your bladder, we see a spot on your liver, we see and we want to dig a little deeper. We're not sure, it just could be some kind of shadow, could be, but we want to dig in this a little deeper and make sure there's not a problem. And that's how these things begin to take and begin to start. You know, if you take and any type of fruit, you take an apple, for example, and that thing has a spot on it, a bruise, the old timers used to call it. Otherwise, a little rotten place. And if you don't cut that rotten place out, what's going to happen? It's going to begin, before you know it, you can have that thing sitting there in that fruit basket on your counter at your home, and what's going to happen before you know it? The whole apple is going to take it. It's going to begin to rise. That cancer is going to take over. But it all started with just that simple little spot. And I believe that's exactly what happens with this spiritual cancer. It's exactly what happens today in people's hearts and in their lives. Let me give you these 3 things this morning real quickly, if I may. First of all, we look at the starting of cancer. The beginning of it, the origin of it. How does it begin to start with? Well, first of all, it's microscopic. You don't even know it's there. You can't even tell. You know, who knows? How many of us may have something in our bodies and we don't have a clue until we start showing some symptoms, or they go draw some blood, or they do whatever, and then they realize, you know, something is not quite right. Otherwise, you wouldn't even know. It's microscopic. It's unseen. A lot of people today come and they sit in church pews Sunday after Sunday, and they have a spiritual cancer. Nobody can see it. Nobody knows it's there. They look good on the outside. You know, they put their vest on, and yes, this is a pink shirt, by the way. It's a pink shirt. And I never thought I'd wear a pink shirt, but I've got a pink shirt. But, you know, you put that on. Like my brand new tie. Got that for Father's Day last year. Brand new tie. Got my grandson on the back of that. Special tie. But you know, you take and you put all that, you shine your shoes, you do whatever. But what's on the inside? He said that's what defiles a man. What is in the heart? What is there that only God? See, God has a microscopic CAT scan. He knows everything that's in our heart. He knows all that's there. You can look good. You can have the whole world fooled. You can have your spouse fooled. You can have your kids fooled. They can all think, boy, that everything's just great. But what is it that's on the inside? That's why one of the things that they say about cancer is what? What's so important? Early detection. You catch it quick enough. You catch it while it's small. You catch it then. Don't let it become another stage and another step. Don't allow it to grow like that in our life. The same way with what Jesus is talking about here in these verses. Whenever we allow that nobody knows it, nobody can see. But when we let that thing take and it metastasizes in our lives, spiritually speaking, and it begins to grow, but if we'll detect it early and say, hey, this has got to go now in my life. People that are serving God, and they love the Lord, they pray every day. They're in the Word of God. They're serving in the church, and they're doing, God is first and foremost in their life. And then all of a sudden, you begin to mishear. This begins to happen in their life. The Bible's not open as much as it used to be. They get busy. They get whatever their excuse is. And they no longer have the relationship with Christ like they once did. Pride begins to creep in. And then they begin to try to find excuses for their slackness as a Christian. They start blaming somebody else. You know what we do? Well, so-and-so said this, or somebody said that. I've gotten offended. By the way, somebody asked about that last week. I said something about offending. They said, I remember over a year ago you preached a message. I went back and tried to dig those notes out. I think I'm going to preach on that tonight, on being, what does the Bible say about being offended? There's a lot to say about it. Jesus offended people, by the way. And people get offended at the truth is what the problem is. But there's people like that, and they just begin to drift, and this cancer begins to take over in them, and spiritually they begin to take it, and they begin to go downhill. It takes over, destroys their life. Sin begins to creep in. One thing leads to another. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, there they are. They've got stage 4 spiritual cancer, and a spiritual death begins to take over in their life. And it's sad. Where did it start at? Microscopic. Started out very, very small. Started out, if they'd have dealt with it then, if they'd have got some help then, I wonder what could have happened and how they could have begun to survive that. They say that a lot of these type of cells that are so prone to it are actually, they believe, or some people are born with it. That it's actually, they say, especially in men, prostate cancer, that the cells are pretty much already there. There are people that believe, I don't know if you can actually prove it, but that they say that men are born with it, but in some it never takes place and it never grows, it never turns into anything in a lot of men. And as I was reading that not long ago, I thought, wow, aren't we all born sinners? Aren't we all born with that nature to begin with? But when we allow that to grow, when we allow that to take over in our life, my goodness, what can happen and what can take place? So the starting of cancer, number 2, the spreading of cancer. The spreading of cancer. I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but a lot of folks here could probably educate me on these different stages of it, I know. But I do know that the worse it gets, I know that